Amnytas is the second full map introduced with the Secrets of the Obscure expansion, and it is home to bastions of the various magic that the Wizard's Court and Astral Ward utilize. Throughout this map, we can find those bastions as well as several other cool areas, and in this video, I want to go over my 10 favorite things across the entire map. So let's get started. In the number 10 spot, we have the Botanical Skygarden. This is a beautiful spot on the eastern end of the Bastion the Natural, where the Astral Ward have collected a bunch of different plants from across Tyria and just have them in a garden here. And as someone who loves plants, the spot is super cool. I love walking through this area and seeing all the different trees and bushes and mushrooms and other stuff. You also got some living plants like jungle worms around here, which actually plays a part in an event, where that event is pretty decent, but the final boss of the event is a Spitfire named Moth-Dew, which I just absolutely love. You're also working with Narcisse, who is a pretty interesting Savari character you meet at the start of the story, and then the vista here gives you a really good overview of this entire area. Coming in at number 9 is the Pool of Reflection. By heading east to the Bastion of Knowledge, we can find a body of water in the Bastion, where there are actually a ton of pools like this all across the map in various different bastions. And then there are some more organic lakes as well, where you can swim in them, do some fishing, and so on. But I just wanted to highlight this one because of how cool it is. You got some cool plants in the water and some wildlife all around here like a dolphin, some koi, a kitten, and more. The area surrounding it is pretty cool with the whole Bastion of Knowledge overlooking this area with the beautiful white and gold walls and spires. And then the pool itself is pretty cool. I just love all the water across this map, and this place is one of my favorites. In the number 8 spot, I have the World Spire and the Bastion of the Celestials, where these two structures make up the center of Amnytas, and they look super cool. I think the World Spire is one of my favorite structures in the entire game, and I just love how the Bastion of the Celestials surrounds it, and then how the rest of Amnytas surrounds that. This map is honestly super gorgeous and I love flying around in it, but a cool part of Amnytas is how it feels similar to Heaven when we are looking at a Heaven versus Hell storyline, where Nyos is a hell-like dimension of demons, and while the Wizard's Court and Astral Ward aren't necessarily angels, their home here feels like Heaven, where I just love those types of themes in games, and I am super happy with how we have gotten an environment that is like that. Where the demons point through the rifts into Amnytas and corrupting people on the land is super cool, where I love all of the demon stuff that is on the Bastion of the Celestials. This location also plays a part of a really cool meta event that we will talk about later, but beyond that, there are just a few events around here, some map completion objectives, and a really cool diving goggles spot. Coming in at number 7, I have the map entrance. Now this may seem super weird, but this is something that I have recently really begun to appreciate with Guild Wars 2, where we have all of the maps in the game and there are different spots in each map where they connect to other maps. Those spots often feature an instance portal and tend to have some sort of decoration around them. Where on the most simple level, there's typically a small canyon that goes off into the distance in the direction of the next map, but other times, there's a lot of effort put into the map portal. Where with the Secrets of the Obscure expansion, we see that all of the maps around here are basically floating islands, and there really isn't the opportunity for traditional map entrances, and they had to get creative. Where in the Wizard's Tower, we see a variety of map portals to the Skywatch Archipelago, Lion's Arch, Amnytas, and then a placeholder portal that will probably take us to Nyos later in the expansion. But when we come into Amnytas, we can see the portal that we come through to get to and from the Wizard's Tower, and I just love it. It really fits the vibes of the zone, where the rest of Amnytas is very angelic-like with white and gold buildings and spires, where we have a really cool tall structure that towers above the central portal here. Then we have the Wizard's Court portal frame that we see used throughout the expansion in a variety of different shapes, and then we have the instance portal on top of that. All around this area, we can find some cool stuff like these golden steps leading up to the portal, some elite constructs, some cool plants, one of the new types of waypoints introduced in the expansion, and more. I just love all the details in the entrance of the map here and how they all come together. In the number 6 spot, I have the Spellcrafting Workshop. This is a super interesting spot in the Bastion of Strength that has a couple of events connected to it. To talk about the area itself, it is pretty cool. It goes super far into the ground, where if you're looking at the bottom of it, you can look up and see the tall walls that make their way to the surface of this giant floating island. It's the same as the rest of Amnytas with the gold and white walls all around it, but you have this really cool spot in the southern bit of it. This area is pretty important in the story of the expansion, but also has a few events in it which I find fun. Where the story of this place is this is where some members of the Astral Ward come to create new spells to use, where there's actually an event where you can help out Galrath and the other mages around here to create new spells, where the event itself is pretty basic, but you have to read what the recipe for the spell is and then run around the room collecting different items, and there are a couple of challenges connected to getting the items. But if you get all 3 items, you create the spell, where there's then a second event that takes place after this one, where you can go with Galrath and go test out the spells on the Kryptis in the area, which I think the combination of these 2 events is such a great concept, especially for an expansion that's focusing on wizards and spells. Coming in at number 5, I have the Livia Escort event. This is part of an event chain where you're helping out Livia and the Bastion of the Obscure to save some artifacts from the Kryptis and bring them all the way over to the Bastion of Knowledge, where I particularly like this part of the event where you, Livia, and anybody else around you hop onto some floating platforms and fly around the map, where you use a rifle and you have to shoot down Kryptis as the platforms navigate their way to the Bastion of Knowledge. If you remember all the way back to the Iceberg Saga, there is an event in Grothmar Valley at Sniper's Square in the training grounds where you're basically doing the same thing. But in Grothmar Valley, you're attacking targets that are standing still in order to practice using this rifle. Where now, we are in the field and are using the rifle to strike down Kryptis, and I have had a ton of fun playing through this event and working with everyone to aim at and take down all the Kryptis trying to stop you and Livia. Unfortunately, the rewards for this event are a little bugged at the time of making this video, but hopefully that gets changed in the future. In the number 4 spot, I have the Lyhr Meta. Each of the bastions around the map have a ton of events connected to them, as we have talked about a few of them in this video. And really, most of the events that I played across the map have been great, and it is a really event-heavy map compared to Skywatch Archipelago, which while it has a ton of events, seems to be a map more focused on exploration. And I love having one of each of these types of maps in an expansion, and I hope that continues in the future. But going back to the Lyhr meta, this is a super fun event chain in the Bastion of Balance, where you are working with Lyhr to bring order back to this area. The main area involved in this event is a building called the Great Debate Hall, where before the Kryptis attacked, this area was used by members of the Astral Ward to debate topics with each other, where oftentimes Lyhr would split into his 2 facets of logic and emotion and debate topics with himself. But with the Kryptis invading Amnytas, the debate hall has been taken over, and you now have to work with Lyhr to bring order to this place, where there are a bunch of Astral Ward arguing with each other about an incredibly important topic. What came first, the harpy or the egg? Where you can listen to this fun conversation while fighting a bunch of the Kryptis in a fun event. You have to split up into 2 groups and kill 2 bosses at the same time, but periodically there's a fun part where you get launched up into the air and have to collect some different orbs before you go back to fighting. And all in all, I just love this event and have had a ton of fun with it. Coming in at number 3 is Crystalpool. This is a relatively random point of interest located in the Bastion of Strength, but I just really like this spot. As you come into this area, you got some floating islands underneath the Bastion of the Celestials, and then you can find a beautiful waterfall pouring out of this area and down off the side of the floating island, where if you look down towards the bottom of the island, you can see a rainbow here. As you find your way up the waterfall, you come into this super cool cave area, which is actually the backside of the cool corner in the Spellcrafting Workshop I showed earlier. And this cave is really cool with a waterfall coming down into it, and it's just another one of those bodies of water I talked about earlier. There are some fish with astral fishers trying to catch the fish, there's a mastery inside and a chest you can get, and then this area is just really pretty and a nice corner of the map. In the number 2 spot is the Museum of Curiosities. This is a really cool location in the Bastion of Knowledge that a lot of people who like the world of Tyria and the story in this game will appreciate. This is a pretty large area that also has a bunch of stuff around it, but when you look at the museum itself, there are a bunch of different rooms. To go in order from my least favorite to most favorite, you have a room with stone statues of some of the different wildlife in Tyria, like deer and doliacs and so on. You then have a room with stone statues of some of the giant creatures you can find around Tyria, specifically giants, megasloths, and a Karka queen. You then have a room with stone statues of some different enemies you find throughout the game, including the Risen Duena statues, Watch Knights, Jade Mechs, and the Radaprimus golems, where there's actually a fun event that some people might know the reference to, where all the stone statues in these rooms come to life, potentially because of the Kryptis, and you have to defeat them. But the best room across this entire museum houses a ton of artifacts that are super cool. Hanging from the top parts of the walls is Empress, who is the greatest Leviathan ever discovered, who apparently people loved very much. Then you have Shore Eater, which the plaque talks about how the Kraid in Viathan Lake had magically transported a Leviathan to Viathan Lake, where we learn that the Leviathans are potentially utilized by Kraits to protect them. And then I think this confirms a small mystery that has been present in the game for some time, where I believe there were NPCs that talked about there being a Leviathan in Kessex Hills at some point. Then on the ground floor, we have a ton of artifacts like a Shattered Templar, the head of the Giganticus Lupicus who we fought in Ara, and a bunch of other artifacts. Where I really want to point out the statue of Deimos here, who is talked about a lot in the expansion, and the plaque in front of the statue confirms that Iscaran actually built the Bastion of the Penitent, and then it was captured by the Mersat and used for their nefarious purposes. but I just absolutely love this area and I highly suggest you come around here, take a look, and read all the plaques here. But now for the number 1 spot, for my favorite thing across the entirety of Amnytas, and this almost went to the Museum of Curiosities, but I decided that I like this one just a little bit more. And it goes to the map's meta event. And if you have not done this meta yet, it is one of my favorites across the entire game, and I had so much fun doing it for the first time, and it is still super fun after having done it multiple times. The story going on here is that we are just dealing with the Kryptis around the map, when suddenly we get word that there might be a large incursion happening soon, and we need to finish up what we are doing and get ready for that incursion. Where the meta begins with you having to defend all the bastions around the map against Tentacles of Lyhr, who is a super cool boss we are going to see in a moment. But after we do that, we are also assisting and summoning 6 different guardians of each of the specific magics that the wizards utilize, where basically this incursion is getting out of hand and has the potential to be the end of Amnytas. So the wizards are pulling a code red last ditch spell that has a super long cooldown, so Amnytas will be vulnerable after we use the spell in order to deal with Lyhr. And I'm still not sure if I'm saying that name correctly. But this is a super cool boss who is the main boss of the meta event, where we head back to the Bastion of the Celestials and the World Spire that I talked about earlier, where we summon 3 of the Guardians and then head to the top of the World Spire where we get to see the boss, and it is incredible. Like, I love this boss's model so much. This is probably one of my favorite boss designs in all Guild Wars 2. It is just so cool looking, but we have to fight against the tentacles, avoid getting possessed, and fight against the boss itself. Where there is then a moment where we have to hop onto our sky scales and use the new fireball mechanic to fly around the World Spire, killing a bunch more tentacles. Where after doing that, we basically do the same thing again, where we summon the last 3 of the Guardians we need to summon, go back to the top of the World Spire, fight some tentacles, and fight the boss again. But this time, Dagda starts doing what some people refer to as advanced yoga, where we basically help her channel the spell that is going to blast Lyhr. If you are confused on what you're supposed to do here, you can look at the map or above Dagda's head to see which button you need to press to help out with the spell. Where after Dagda blasts Lyhr, you hop onto your sky scale and finish the boss, which triggers a decently cool cutscene. And that is the end of this meta. This is definitely one of my favorite metas in the game, and this boss has skyrocketed to being one of my favorite bosses in the entirety of Guild Wars 2. I think it's kinda just nice to fight a huge enemy that isn't an Elder Dragon, but this boss in meta is one of my favorite things from the Secrets of the Obscure expansion, and is my favorite thing in Amnytas. And that's my list. I hope you enjoyed. I really like this map and had a lot to say about some parts of it. Of course, there's a ton of stuff that I enjoy that didn't make this list, which I threw a few down in the description as honorable mentions. But if you want to share any of your favorite parts about the map, feel free to do so in the comments below. I didn't find a ton of secrets in this map, so I am definitely interested in learning about any of them, and I might include them in a future video. I hope you all are taking good care of yourselves. Have a good one, everyone.